You sit down at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, your glasses, a council tax bill, a pension letter, and that small, uneasy thought that has been nagging at you for weeks. Have I missed something? Not a scam, not some brand new scheme nobody has heard of, just money that may already exist for people over state pension age, but somehow never reaches them because no form was sent, no claim was made, or nobody realized they had to ask in the first place. That is the part that catches so many people out. It is not always about being short of money in an obvious way. Quite often, it is quieter than that. You are managing, just about. You notice the food shop costs more than it used to, heating takes a bigger bite, council tax goes up again, something in the house needs replacing, so another bit of the budget gets squeezed. Then the paperwork starts building up in a neat little pile, because every envelope seems to ask for more concentration than you feel like giving it. And the easiest thing in the world is to assume this: if there were extra help meant for me, surely somebody would tell me. That sounds reasonable. In fact, most people would think exactly the same. But with several important payments for pensioners, that is where money gets missed. Some support does not begin unless you claim it. Some only appears if the right office is contacted. Some depends on a review or correction, and some can be missed for months or even years because the person involved thought the system would spot it automatically. That is not carelessness, it is just how complicated this can be. A lot of people over pension age grew up with the idea that if something official mattered, a letter would arrive, the amount would be worked out, and things would move into place. Sometimes that does happen, but not always, and when it does not, the silence can be expensive. What makes this especially frustrating is that the missed money is often tied to very ordinary life changes: needing more help at home than you used to, living on a modest retirement income, looking after a husband, wife, or relative, being widowed, reaching state pension age and assuming the pension would simply start. These are common situations. They do not feel unusual, but each one can connect to support that many people never check. And there is another problem. People often rule themselves out too early. They think, I have some savings, so I probably will not qualify. Or, I manage on my own, so I should not apply. Or, I own my home, so there is no point asking. Or, if there had been an error with my pension, they would have fixed it by now. Or, I was told no once, so that must be the end of it. Those assumptions are very common. They are also exactly why so much goes unclaimed. The good news is that this becomes much less overwhelming once you stop treating it as one big financial mystery and start breaking it into a few simple checks. Not dozens, just a handful of very specific questions. Is there support linked to care needs, even if income is not low? Is there help with council tax that has never been applied? Could an older pension award be worth checking again? Could a carer claim matter even if no payment is expected? And was the state pension itself ever properly claimed in the first place? That is the shift that matters. From a vague worry in the back of your mind to a practical list you can test one by one. Because these payments usually do not come looking for you. That is the truth underneath all of this. Knowing that can save a lot of wasted time, but more importantly, it can save missed income. So instead of staring at that pile of letters and wondering whether any of it applies to you, it helps to sort the whole question into 3 clear things: who each payment is for, what usually causes it to be missed, and the one step that gets the process moving. Once you see it that way, the fog starts to lift. And the first 2 checks are often the ones hiding in plain sight: help for daily living needs and help with a council tax bill that may be higher than it needs to be. The first one is attendance allowance, and this is where many people wrongly assume they will not qualify. If getting through the day has become harder because of a health condition or disability, this is worth a proper look. That might mean needing help with washing, dressing, getting up and down stairs, keeping on top of medication, using the toilet safely, or managing during the night. It can also include needing someone nearby to keep an eye on you, even if you are not having hands-on care all the time. What matters here is not simply a diagnosis on paper, it is how your condition affects daily life. And one of the biggest surprises is that attendance allowance is not means tested. Savings do not automatically block it. Most income does not automatically block it either. A lot of people miss out because they think, I manage on my own, so I should not apply. But coping bravely is not the same thing as not needing help. There are different rates depending on whether help is needed in the day, at night, or both. The practical step is simple. Check whether your day-to-day needs fit the rules, and if they do, make a claim rather than waiting for anyone to suggest it. The second check is much more ordinary, but it can still make a real difference every month. Council tax reduction. This is where people often mix up one kind of help with another. Someone may know about the single-person discount and assume that is the only council tax support available. Or they may think, I own my home, so that rules me out. It does not work that neatly. Council tax reduction is means-tested support run by your local council, not by DWP, and pension age rules can sometimes be more generous than people expect. If your income is modest, if you live alone, or if most of what you live on is state pension and maybe a small private pension, it is worth checking. Even incomes that feel a little too high for help can still sometimes qualify, depending on your situation and your council's scheme. The usual reason it gets missed is simple. People assume any reduction would already be on the bill if they were entitled to it, but many councils expect you to apply, so the step here is to contact your local council directly and ask about council tax reduction, not just discounts. Then there is a less obvious one, but an important one for some older households: state pension underpayment corrections. This mainly affects certain people on older state pension rules, especially some married women, widows, and people over 80. In some cases, pension amounts were not increased correctly years ago, and where underpayments are found, arrears can be paid as a lump sum. Now, this does not mean everyone has been underpaid, and it is not mainly about newer pension awards, but if your pension started a long time ago, or your circumstances changed through marriage, widowhood, or reaching 80, it may be worth checking rather than assuming any old problem would already have been fixed. That assumption is exactly what causes people to miss this. They think a pension set years ago must be settled forever. Sometimes it is not. The practical step is to look at your pension history, and if you are in one of the groups affected, ask DWP or the Pension Service for a review. The fourth one catches people because it sounds backwards at first. Carer's allowance can matter even if you expect not to be paid it. If you spend at least 35 hours a week caring for a husband, wife, partner, or another person, you may think there is no point applying because your state pension is too high or overlaps with it. And it is true that overlapping benefit rules can stop carer's allowance being paid in the normal way, but that is not always the end of the story. A refused claim can still create what is called underlying entitlement. In plain English, that means the carer status is still recognized, and that can sometimes increase pension credit. So the common mistake is never applying because you expect a no. The step is to check whether a carer's allowance claim could create underlying entitlement and help with pension credit, even without a direct carer's allowance payment. And the fifth check is the most time-sensitive of all. State pension itself may need to be claimed. A lot of people still assume it starts automatically when they reach pension age. Sometimes people are working longer, moving house, dealing with family matters, or simply putting paperwork off. Then months pass. In many cases, state pension can be backdated, but usually only up to 12 months. So if someone reached state pension age and never actually claimed, this needs checking sooner rather than later. The mistake is waiting too long because you thought it was already in motion. The practical step is to check the claim status now and contact the pension service if anything looks unclear. By this point, a pattern starts to appear. It is not just about what exists. It is about which door each payment sits behind and which claim, check, or phone call opens it. And that is where the next part really matters. What makes this easier to handle is noticing that the same few traps keep coming up again and again. One is assuming everything important happens automatically. Another is thinking all support comes from one place, when in fact some of it sits with DWP, some with the pension service, and some with your local council. And another is giving up too soon because a rule sounds final when it is not. That is why this is less about hunting for obscure benefits and more about matching the right question to the right office. If the issue is care needs, even when you live independently and do your best to manage, that points toward attendance allowance. If the issue is a council tax bill that feels heavy against a modest income, that points toward your local council and council tax reduction. If the issue is an old state pension award, especially around marriage, widowhood, or a pension first set many years ago, that points toward checking whether an underpayment review is worth asking for. If the issue is regular caring for someone else, that may point toward a carer's allowance claim even when payment is unlikely, because underlying entitlement could still matter. And if the issue is a pension that may never have been claimed at all, or was claimed late, that points toward checking state pension status and possible backdating. That is the real shift. At the start, it all feels like one pile of confusing paperwork. By the end, it becomes 5 separate checks, and that matters because vague worry usually leads to delay. A specific check is much easier to act on. It also helps to know when to pay closer attention. If you are widowed, if your pension began under older rules, if you care for someone week after week, if your income is tight, or if you are helping an older relative sort out finances and discover gaps, those are all moments when it is sensible to pause and ask whether something has been missed, not because something is definitely wrong, just because these are the points where missed money often hides. There is a bigger lesson in all of this as well. Later life finances are not only about budgeting carefully, they are also about knowing where the system has hidden gates. Sometimes the difference between struggling quietly and having a bit more breathing room is not a dramatic life change. It is knowing that a claim had to be made, that a refusal was not the end, or that an old award could still be checked. That can feel annoying, and honestly, for many people it is. You do the sensible thing. You assume official systems will tell you what you need to know. Then years later, you discover that some support depended on asking the exact question in the exact place. But once you know that, you are in a much stronger position. You do not have to solve everything in one afternoon. You do not have to decode every letter at once. The useful next step is simply to take that notepad on the kitchen table and turn worry into a short list. Do I have care needs that might make attendance allowance worth checking? Is my council tax bill higher than it needs to be? Could an old state pension award need reviewing? Am I caring for someone enough hours that a carer's allowance claim could help in another way? Was the state pension ever properly claimed, and if so, when? That is a manageable list, much more manageable than a general fear that something, somewhere, is being missed. And if the paperwork is unclear or the rules seem muddled, that is the moment to ask rather than guess. The pension service, your local council, or a trusted advisor can often help make sense of which door to try first. So when you look back at that kitchen table with the letters, the bill, the glasses, and the cup of tea going cold, it no longer has to feel like a pile of unanswered questions. It can be 5 practical checks. Nothing more mysterious than that. And if even one of those checks leads to money you should have been getting all along, that is not a bonus. That is simply making sure your income is not smaller than it needs to be.